Welcome to the Rebecca Panapinto Project. Today, I am very excited to host Richard Sides. Richard is the founder and CEO of Adroit. There, he brings a depth of technical operations and business process expertise to the food and beverage industry. His industry engagements have yielded dramatic ROI for some of the world's leading food and beverage processors. Richard believes in driving digital transformation that truly lasts. His decades-long career is marked by leading organizational change and improvements that can be sustained for optimal performance and are ingrained in the organizational culture. I loved our conversation today. We'll have a chance to learn more about the incredible impact Adroit is having on the food and beverage industry, but also their unique go-to-market with Shopify. Enjoy the show. Richard, welcome to the show today.
Great to be here, Rebecca.
Yes, very excited. I came across your company through your marketing lead and was really excited to meet you and learn more. So let's chat today about how you're making a big impact in the industry and what you guys are doing to drive digital transformation at Adroit. I would love to start with, you partner in a slightly different niche than myself. I've been heavily in the Google, now Amazon ecosystem, whereas you've spent your time with Microsoft. So I want to get your take on what you've learned from working within the Microsoft ecosystem and why you chose them as your go-to-market partner.
Sure. So it's sort of a combination of Microsoft and Aptean. So Aptean they're approaching $1 billion at this point. So it's sort of like we're married up with, like literally in a marriage with Aptean, and then within the Microsoft ecosystem. It's been a really interesting journey, especially on the Microsoft side. It's somewhat difficult to figure out how to approach it. It's a complicated organization and a complicated set of things. And they tend to go to market through partnerships versus direct, right? So we don't have a lot of direct access to Microsoft. It tends to be, they sort of have some master distributors that they set up. And then like we work under those master distributors. So it was sort of shopping around and figuring out which of those, and we ended up ultimately with Stratos. So like Stratos is like one of a couple of major players in the Microsoft ecosystem. So once we've kind of figured that out and figured out how to get signed up as a partner and all those types of things, it's just a lot. Like I was kind of surprised in terms of just like understanding how to plug into that. But we got through most of that stuff now over the last 5 years. And then there's sub within that, right? Because it's such a vast set of products that are out there, and we're kind of slotted into what Microsoft's mid-market ERP solution called Dynamics Business Central. So it's like a community within a community within a community. And then, of course, on the Aptean side with their food and beverage ERP.
I mean, they say the riches are in the niches. So it doesn't hurt to double down and really know your ideal customer profile and make sure you serve them well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we just came off of, like literally a couple of hours ago, we were working through our strat plan for 26. I mean, that was a lot of like what we talked about is like, what are the niches that we're focusing on, which is, food and beverage for us, food and beverage. And then within that business central community, focusing on supply chain and logistics and those types of areas. So yeah, as you're kind of coming through the curve, like we can't aspire to be in the short term incredibly broad with our product offering because you just don't have the width to be able to market and penetrate with that. So we try to stay pretty reserved with it.
So when you're first getting introduced to a mid-market leader and they want to work with Adroit, are they usually raising their hand for the product first and saying, hey, we want to specifically use Microsoft in this scenario? Or are they typically just at a loss of not knowing what to do and how to solve their problem, that you're introduced and ultimately the right solution is going to be Microsoft because that's what you're most skilled on?
Yeah, it depends if we're going with an intermediary or not. Right. So we call it our influencer channel. So there's there's several companies out there that really kind of specialize in helping companies decide like how to move forward with their tech strategy. And so, we call them ERP selection firms or those types of things. So if they're in the mix, then it tends to be a little bit more of an agnostic view from the customer. Like they're really first, I think, looking at feature function fit, industry fit, and then tech stack. There's occasions where there's like a strong bias towards one tech stack or another. And that those tend to be ones that are kind of led more from the CTO or CIO role. If they're business led, they tend to be much more kind of focusing on the industry stack, industry orientation, which is kind of what we tend to lead with. So we're like hardcore on the ERP side into food and beverage. So we're leading a lot more with our depth, and they were like really a transformation partner with a lot of depth in terms of like the specific differences in food and beverage and like the unique problems of food and beverage, right? And then enabled with the tremendous technology capabilities from Aptian layered on top of Business Central. So that's more what I see is we're tending to go in on more of a sort of a dogfight within a particular industry. And then the tech stack is sort of like second on the peg.
That's good. That's the way it should be, in my opinion. Well, and Shopify is part of your tech stack too. I know you guys are helping serve folks with their e-commerce and using Shopify. What does that look like within how you guys serve customers and the go-to-market around Shopify?
Yeah, so we're in food and beverage processing and distribution. So within that industry, historically that tends to be pallet-based type of business. So the whole pick, pack, ship process for selling into retail or selling into, a distributor model is quite different than if you're going into like a direct to consumer or even like a B2B portal. And so Microsoft partnered with Shopify and built out sort of some, we'll call them entry level connectors between Business Central and Shopify. So it's sort of like already baked into BC. What we find is that the ERP providers tend to be kind of much more focused on ERP, and the Shopify and e-com providers tend to be sort of siloed into that. And there's not a lot of a forethought, so to speak, in terms of like that whole pick, pack, ship process and that whole order capture. Like, so there's just a big delta there. And it's kind of a heavy lift. So like we're starting to pursue that more earnestly in terms of how to get into e-com and how to help folks spin up either customer portals or storefronts, via the Shopify, and then bring in our expertise on the shop floor and in the WMS to be able to, kind of facilitate that piece picking, because it's a very different setup, right? So if you're doing a pallet pick, that's like you go find the pallet, bring it out and ship it. But if you're doing direct to consumer kinds of stuff, then it's more like the case is moving past Ford pick locations, right? So it's like bringing the inventory to Ford pick locations, and then the case is moving past, and then based on the hit rates, right, doing drops into the case. So it's just a wholly completely different sort of pick, pack, ship setup. And then you're using like common carriers like UPS and FedEx and stuff to get the stuff out. So that's like, it's just a unique kind of a thing that we're really starting to push into.
What is the typical increase in margin for a food and bev company when they go to being able to distribute directly to their consumer versus through a grocery store or any other intermediary?
I mean, it's a great question. I don't really have like a specific margin tick, but it's more of the market's pulling them there than anything, or they're seeing margin compression in their distribution channels, right? And so as sort of a defensive move, they're starting to go direct to it. Most are kind of like apprehensive about it because of that channel conflict that they're trying to get into. But the whole concept of omni-channel continues to like progress forward, which is, being able to interact with your customer at any level in the channel. And that's starting to bleed into food and bev, I think.
I think a big part when it comes to food and beverage too is brand loyalty. People drink Coke because it's Coke, or Pepsi because they're a Pepsi person. You've seen it with Prime, just insane growth with Prime. I'm a big fan of Athletic Brews. I think they do it very well, and they have what they call ambassadors. So I have a ridiculous amount of free beer because I post on Instagram and drive them to my own little storefront. So I think if you want to really truly own your brand, it is a really smart move. And ultimately, even though it might be thin margins to start, the longer play and the life of a customer you have, because you now are directly in their inbox, you're directly having them subscribe to a 6-pack every month. Mm-hmm. That is worth it leaps and bounds than just the immediate hit you get from it being directly through your website versus at Whole Foods.
I tend to agree with that. What I've seen in food and beverage over the years is like the main brands, like they've had like erosion. So like, for example, even in beer, right? So if you go back 30 years, like the number of brands that are out there. And so like microbrews really, really kind of like cut into that. And out of school, I came into work for Kraft Foods. And even back in the 90s, and the conversation was about brand erosion of Kraft Foods with threats from private label and, locally sourced, organic, and all this type of stuff. So I think Whole Foods has a good strategy in terms of like trying to into their local things, do more locally sourced stuff. And then it's just like the whole Amazon acquisition of Whole Foods is sort of like married all this up to like more of like this omni-channel kind of view in food, which is locally sourced. You could pick it up. You could do home delivery. You can do like from Amazon direct, so like that's where I think the future is.
Yeah, access. Because let's be honest, like my nieces and nephews love mac and cheese when it's Kraft mac and cheese. There's only a deviation from that if it's to have a gluten-free option or a dairy-free option from time to time when needed. But I see a little brand loyalty even in the early stages for them. So that's an interesting take that as a whole, there is pieces because, I mean, there's a competitor sitting right there ready to take your shelf space.
Yeah, for sure.
I want to talk about a couple of your specific customers where you were able to drive the full transformation for them. Rocky Mountain Chocolate Factory was one that I found really interesting. Tell us about the evolution of that customer and how you were able to make a big impact.
So Rocky is, obviously I'm going to protect, confidentialities, but Rocky is a franchise model, right? So they have several hundred stores across the country, and if you've been walked through an airport or something, you've seen them, particularly out in the Colorado area, and et cetera. For them, it was like how to get them set up to be able to like process these orders across the franchises, have a good forecast in terms of like what that consumption was going to bring that back into kind of like a traditional processor model. So we spend a lot of time with them on the supply chain side. And we spent a lot of time with them in terms of, it was kind of like a unique setup that we did for them in terms of touch screens. It's like for like weighing stations. So like we brought together a whole bunch of different technologies. So it was like the touch screens and the scales and then Aptean Food and Beverage ERP kind of all coming together into like one sort of seamless tech solution on the floor. So again, like earlier we were talking about on the e-com side, like sort of tends to be siloed. We sort of see the same thing on the plant floor in terms of technology, the tech, like mobile devices, scales, and that whole hardware layer. And so we took that hardware layer and we married it up with the ERP to really kind of innovate the work procedures on the plant floor was I think like one of the big successes. And then lastly, they were just looking for some consolidated metrics to just understand like where the business is, like that you would typically expect. But yeah, it was a super successful project. And then the other one was Stoneground. So Stoneground was a little bit fairly traditional, but really hard and fast delivery timelines. So for us, the challenge was how to bring up 2 different locations with a full scope deployment in 8 to 9 months. So for them, it was really about taking a look at our project plans and really compressing them. And they were great in that they stepped up with their resources. Like that was like the big thing. It was like, we can tend to run as fast as a client wants, but it's the resources on their side. So it was like a real good partnership there, and that they got the folks served up. And then with that, then post go live, they had like a kind of a unified view across their locations and businesses, which then helped them out in terms of what they needed to get done.
So in both cases, they ended up using the complete Aptean Microsoft stack.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Got it. Are there other industries or I should say verticals within the industry outside of food and bev that you have aspirations to go further serve and help with ERP?
Yeah, so we're kind of going to echo over time what Aptean's doing. So there's a couple of industries that are moving into life sciences, and I think it would be like a natural step for us would be because like we've had some good project management and some good internal expertise around life sciences. So I would see us kind of going into sort of life sciences light, which is more like nutraceuticals and those types of things first before we go hardcore into like all on pharma. But that's of interest to us down the line. But the food industry, like we were just looking, the other day at sort of the market opportunity around this food and beverage, and it's so large. And, we're so confident with the solutions that we have. And for that, I think we're a ways yet before we sort of make the leap into another industry. There's always a danger, right, for the next shiny object and to trace that, right? But, when you're in a $1 trillion industry, it doesn't really make sense to move outside of that instead of just getting really strong and deep into it. But it's possible.
Yeah, there's more that you can serve.
Sometimes the market pulls it. Sometimes the market pulls us that way. We have plenty of opportunities that we've worked on outside of food and bev, but it's more like they find us more
Yeah.
versus us going and pitching to them.
So being in the food and beverage industry and background of craft, are you a foodie?
Am I a gourmet guy? I
Mm,
mean, yeah, I would say so. I mean, I'm certainly not a cook or anything
okay.
like that, but it's more like an operational guy. It's kind of like how I would say, and less of a quote total foodie kind of video. It's more
What
like,
about going to restaurants and experiencing the, 3-course full on,
oh,
you
well, I
know?
mean, I love a great tasting menu. I mean, we're going out tonight to a fixed plate menu, and for sure, I love all that for sure. But the other thing that my challenge is then I start looking at the operation of the restaurant. So
And then you can't eat there anymore?
so I start examining the queuing and like the
Mhm.
organization and the efficiencies and all that kind of stuff just because of my engineering background. But no, I mean, I have definitely an appreciation for fine food and naturally sourced, non-processed stuff. I tend to really like lean into a lot more protein, less carbohydrates. And, so like that's like a sort of a trend that I've seen just really among many, many people is I've seen just a move away from processed and move away from high carb to more protein based and plant based type stuff, which I think is a really positive for the country, to be honest.
Oh, 100%. You just feel better.
Yeah.
But you are in a great food market. So I love that you take full advantage of getting out there.
Oh yeah. Chicago, it's definitely one of the top 4 or 5 cities in the world. It's a challenge when you travel though, because like you have like these standards based on the restaurants and which you have access to in Chicago, and then you head out to another city, or you get out into smaller markets and stuff. They just don't have the opportunity for the types of ingredients and stuff that you can get here in the locally sourced market. So yeah, I'm definitely fortunate to be in Chicago.
New York City ruins you for seafood. Like I can't really do seafood in the South anymore, unfortunately. It doesn't compare. So you learn.
Yeah,
You can still get good hot chicken in the South.
it's amazing. Like you get fresher salmon in like New York or Chicago than I would get like on the coast.
Yep, it is true.
Yep.
You pay for it too, but
Yeah.
at least you could get it. So on top of Chicago being a good food town, it's also a great jazz town. And I know you have a jazz and a music background. So tell us a little about how you're practicing these days within the music business and still staying involved with your creative side.
But yeah, for sure, everybody needs a creative side to kind of counter. So I originally got into music. I mean, I played in high school and then I just went away from it. And then about 10 years ago, I got back in, picked up clarinet, took lessons. It was kind of funny is like, I just went on Craigslist and found a teacher, and she ended up being like one of the most accomplished clarinet players ever to come out of Hong Kong. Right. And so I ended up with this amazing clarinet teacher. Yun Yi is her name. So I studied with her for a couple of years. And then she encouraged me to join a band or to someday, quote, form my own band, which I thought was kind of a crazy idea at the time. But I ended up finding a community band here in Chicago and joined that, made a bunch of friends, and we just started jamming in my basement and learning how to improvise and how to play jazz. It's hugely difficult. Like it's like improvising. So it was like a whole new vocabulary to learn. It was like learning a new language. I found that incredibly compelling. And yeah, so we just found a couple of places to play, started playing, and then fast forward 7 years, we're playing a gig a month around the Chicago area, some nice sized stages and stuff. And it's a 7-piece band, and I picked up sax along the way, a little bit of keyboard, and it's humbling. And I think that's probably one of the big things for me is it's just a really humbling because there's so many people with such incredible talent, and as good as you think you are, like you're just like this compared to where they are. So it keeps you humble and keeps you learning. So 2 things that I think are important to me.
Have you learned any like leadership lessons that have transferred into how you lead your company and serve your customers by, being part of a band, being a part of just a different creative outlet?
Yeah, right. So it's a leadership style, especially. So I formed the band, but I'm nowhere near the most accomplished musician in the band, like far from it. And nor can you, like, through the course of a song, really control what somebody else is doing, right? So it's trust, it's empowerment and trust, and more of just facilitation versus you're going to play it this way, you're going to play it this way, right? So it's about enabling creativity, within the structure, but enabling the creativity. And like you end up with this amazing stuff on performance night that would never a million years have happened if I said, well, my creativity is going to drive what these folks do. And it's the same thing in Adroit and all the other leadership positions I've had, is like seeking the best talent and just really putting a structure in place and letting them, flourish within it and not try to drive and control, right? And being humble and vulnerable enough to be able to do that. Like, that's where I would kind of see the tie-in.
Mm. Yeah, that's awesome. Any musicians within the company? Yeah,
there's like some guitar, some keyboard. I don't really recruit for musical skills, so I don't really know. But
it just seems hand in hand a lot of times with technical people that they've got really incredible musical chops that, you don't know until all of a sudden they're like, hey, I've got a gig this week. And you're like, wait, what?
Yeah, it would be a good survey. Actually, I should do that. In my last company that I was with, it was heavily musical, and there was like kind of like a joke at times about, having like a virtual band and stuff. Like one of my peers was like hardcore into an accordion kind of a thing, and so he would make funny videos playing accordion and stuff. So that's a way to connect for sure.
Yeah, I was in a battle of the bands once for a company that I was a project manager, and just by getting to know people I worked with, the DBA I met was actually the Little River Band drummer as his side job. So he became our lead singer and let me be on the drums, which was really, really fun. And I was like, who would have thought? Like, this guy has a normal day job, and on the weekends he's a nice rock star. So
yeah, it's hard to make ends meet in music, though.
Yeah, I think at one point he was a backup singer for Loretta Lynn too. Like, he had been there, done that, but went and got technical skills and became a DBA in healthcare, and now kind of gets to live a little bit of a double life, but be fulfilled in both areas.
There's a lot of folks in systems. So like the bass player in my band is the CTO for like another company. The Hajwa is like a hardcore statistical person in the unit, right? So it's like the creative aspect fits in well with the software development and technical profile, right? Those tend to be sort of a common wavelength from a thinking perspective, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very cool. Well, this has been fun. I want to just close with one final question, and it's around principles. Mm-hmm. I'm curious, what is the guiding principle you've lived by to be successful in business?
Yeah, so there's a guy, I think Hormozy is like, so Hormozy's got like his stuff, and I love his content, and I'm constantly absorbing his and Martel's, and like there's all these guys out there that I really study a lot. But I like the concept of giving first. I found to be really, really pay off for me, and not really expecting anything back. And just by, being humble and giving first, and just being, creating a win-win versus a take, I found to pay off in spades down the line with people that are just really looking to then ultimately sort of help you, without asking, or, when you need a favor or something like that. That's kind of been my attack, right? So like, for example, when I look at my relationship with Aptian and other folks that we partner with, it's really just trying to understand like where their weaknesses are, and then just offering support in those weaknesses. If they need help closing business, go and support them to close the business, whether you're going to get something back or not. That doesn't matter, right? It's really helping them be successful, and ultimately that's recognized. And I think pays off 10x.
Yes. Big Alex Hormozy fan. So I love that. He's a good one. Yep. Well, Richard, thanks for the time today. So enjoyed getting to know you better and your company Adroit, and excited to see what you guys do next.
All right. Thanks, Rebecca. It's a pleasure. A lot of fun.
We'll talk soon.
Okay.